Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Nothing's simple in life, is it? And don't even get me started on superannuation. But there is something you need to be aware of, specifically about the rules around the super guarantee payments to employees, which are changing. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Most of us will have heard that the payments are going up from 9.5% of an employee's earnings, as it currently stands, to 10%. And it's all happening on the 1st of July. That's simple enough, isn't it, if we're to assume that the increase will go ahead. But will all employees receive the increase? Yes and no is the answer, according to HR and industrial relations expert Cheryl-Anne Laird of Mazars. And already things are getting more complicated. But we need to pay attention if we want to avoid being charged by the ATO. Cheryl-Anne highlights the rules about who gets what for Heather Dawson. And first, a word of clarification, just in case you're unclear about what the super guarantee payments are all about.
It's actually quite interesting. Most people think it's an obligation on employers to pay superannuation. It's actually an obligation on employers to pay an amount to the tax office if they don't pay superannuation to their employees. So essentially, if an employer misses paying superannuation, they have to pay a charge to the Australian Taxation Office of an amount which is more than they would have had to pay in superannuation. So it's a fairly unique way of encouraging employers to actually pay superannuation.
Well, we hear that there's going to be an increase in the superannuation guarantee, but is there a chance that that increase will not proceed on the 1st of July this year?
There was certainly talk right throughout the early part of this year that maybe the superannuation increase planned for the 1st of July wouldn't go ahead. However, given we're now in May, and there's been no indication, I think we can safely say that at least the increase in superannuation from 1 July will proceed.
And will there be more increases, do you think? Are they planned for future years?
The legislation currently provides that from this year, so from 2021, employer superannuation will increase by 0.5% on the 1st of July of every year up until 1 July 2025. And by then, employer superannuation should be at 12%.
Right. Well, from the 1st of July of this year, 2021, will all employees receive the increase that's been announced, been planned?
The answer to that question I wish was really simple, but it's not. The answer is yes and no. All eligible employees will have their superannuation increased by 0.5% to 10%. However, for some employees, this will not lead to an increase in overall remuneration. So, for example, there is a minimum level at which superannuation is paid, and that's $450 in any month. And unless that is changed in the legislation, that will continue in place. So people who earn less than $450 in any month will still get no superannuation. There is also a maximum contribution. It's currently $25,000 a year. It will increase to $27,500 in 2021. And employers are not required to make superannuation contributions on the part of the earnings which would lead to superannuation in excess of that limit. And finally, some employees will have the additional superannuation absorbed into their existing remuneration arrangements. That is that their remuneration will stay the same, but 0.5% of what is currently in wages or salary will be moved over into superannuation.
Right. So explain why can some employees have the increased superannuation absorbed into their existing remuneration?
Firstly, let me sort of secure this for most people. In the vast majority of cases, particularly those employees who are covered by a modern award and who are paid exactly in terms of the award, will get the 0.5% increase. That is the total value of their remuneration, being their wages and superannuation, will increase by an amount of the increased superannuation. However, for employees who are award-free, and if they have a contract which provides for total remuneration inclusive of superannuation, without any specific attribution of how much goes into superannuation and how much goes into wages or salary, it is open to an employer to simply shift the amount from salary to superannuation and maintain the same remuneration. Also, some contracts of employment provide that amounts that are paid under the contract may be offset against other entitlements. Now, this is both for people covered by awards and people who are award-free. Depending on the wording of such provisions, it may also be possible that additional superannuation could be offset against these additional payments that people are already receiving. And in those cases, the overall remuneration won't change.
Okay. Well, will employees see the increased superannuation in their super accounts immediately?
No. Employer superannuation is only required to be paid quarterly. Some employers choose to pay it more often, but the requirement is that it be paid quarterly. So they won't actually see the increase in the amount of their superannuation until the next quarterly instalment is made. Superannuation for the quarter starting 1 July and ending on 30 September is due to be paid on the 28th of November. So it's likely that most people won't see the increase until that 28 November payment is due.
Okay, well, it's obviously important for employers to get their brains around all this. What should they do if they're not sure about how to comply with the increased super guarantee payments for their employees?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, there are some real complexities for people, particularly if they have awards or enterprise agreements, and how it might apply. And there are different ways employers can achieve compliance. Given that complexity, we say to anyone who is not simply planning to increase their payroll by the 0.5% and pay everybody the additional superannuation on top of their current remuneration really should get some advice before they take any action to do anything that might result in an underpayment of superannuation in the future. The wording of a particular contract or a particular enterprise agreement will be determinative of whether or not extra superannuation needs to be paid or if the existing remuneration sufficiently covers this increase. And therefore, if employers don't get advice, don't get it right, they might find themselves subject to this superannuation guarantee charge I mentioned at the beginning, whereby the amount that they would have paid under superannuation may well have to be paid as a charge to the tax office. And most of us want to avoid that at all costs.
That was Cheryl-Anne Laird, HR and Industrial Relations expert and partner at Mazars. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.